Here in a bar on the street of the Saint in la calle San Sebastián, a dancer in white with a red scarf in la calle San Sebastián calls to the gods who were freed by slaves in la calle San Sebastián, and his bronze face is a lantern of sweat in la calle San Sebastián, and hands smack congas like flies in the field in la calle San Sebastián, and remember the beat of packing crates in la calle San Sebastián, from the days when overseers banished the drum in la calle San Sebastián, and trumpets screech like parrots of gold in la calle San Sebastián, trumpets that herald the end of the war in la calle San Sebastián, as soldiers toss rifles on cobblestone in la calle San Sebastián, and the saint himself snaps an arrow in half in la calle San Sebastián. Then lost grandfathers and fathers appear in la calle San Sebastián, fingers tugging my steel wool beard in la calle San Sebastián, whispering, "Your beard is gray" in la calle San Sebastián, spilling their rum across the table in la calle San Sebastián, till cousins lead them away to bed in la calle San Sebastián. And the dancer in white with a face of bronze in la calle San Sebastián shakes rain from his hair like the god of storms in la calle San Sebastián, and sings for the blood that drums in the chest in la calle San Sebastián, and praises the blood that beats in the hands in la calle San Sebastián and la calle San Sebastián. In the projects of Brooklyn, everyone lied. My mother used to say, "If somebody starts a fight, just walk away." Then somebody would smack the back of my head and dance around me in a circle, laughing. When I was 12, pus bubbled on my tonsils, and everyone said, "After the operation, you can have all the ice cream you want." I bragged about the deal. No longer would I chase the ice cream truck down the street, panting at the bells to catch Johnny, the ice cream man who allegedly sold heroin the color of vanilla from the same window. Then Jack, the truth teller, visited the projects. Jack, who herded real camels and sheep through the snow of East Harlem every Three Kings Day. Jack, who wrote sonnets of the jail cell and the racetrack and the boxing ring. Jack, who crossed his arms in a hunger strike until the mayor hired more Puerto Ricans. And Jack said, "You gonna get your tonsils out? Ay, bendito cuchifrito, Puerto Rico, that's gonna hurt." I was etherized, then woke up on the ward, heaving black water onto white sheets. A man poking through his hospital gown leaned over me and sneered, "You think you got it tough? Look at this," and showed me the cauliflower tumor behind his ear. I heaved up black water again. The ice cream burned. Vanilla was a snowball spiked with bits of glass. My throat was red as a tunnel on fire after the head-on collision of two gasoline trucks. This is how I learned to trust the poets and shepherds of East Harlem. Blessed be the truth tellers, for they shall have all the ice cream they want. Francisca said, "Marry my sister so she can stay in the country." I had nothing else to do. I was 23 and always cold, skidding in cigarette coupon boots from lamppost to lamppost through January in Wisconsin. Francisca and Isabel washed bed sheets at the hotel, sweating in the humidity of the laundry room, conspiring in Spanish. I met her the next day. Isabel was 19, from a village where the elders spoke the language of the Aztecs. She would smile whenever the ice pellets of English clattered around her head. When the justice of the peace said, "You may kiss the bride," our lips brushed for the first and only time. The borrowed ring was too small, jammed into my knuckle. There were snapshots of the wedding and champagne in plastic cups. Francisca said. The snapshots will be proof for immigration. We heard rumors of the interview. They would ask me the color of her underwear. They would ask her who rode on top. We invented answers and rehearsed our lines. We flipped through immigration forms at the kitchen table the way other couples shuffle cards for gin rummy. After every hand, I'd deal again. Isabel would say, "Quiero ver las fotos." She wanted to see the pictures of a wedding that happened but did not happen. Her face inexplicably happy, me hoisting a green bottle dizzy after half a cup of champagne. Francisca said, "She can sing corridos, songs of love and revolution from the land of Zapata." All night, Isabel sang corridos in a bar room where no one understood a word. I was the bouncer and her husband, so I hushed the squabbling drunks who blinked like tortoises in the sun. Her boyfriend and his beer cans never understood why she married me. Once he kicked the front door down and the blast shook the house as if a hand grenade detonated in the hallway. When the cops arrived, I was the translator, watching the sergeant, watching her, the inscrutable squaw from every Western he had ever seen, bare feet and long black hair. We lived behind a broken door. We lived in a city hidden from the city. When her headaches began, no one called a doctor. When she disappeared for days, no one called the police. When we rehearsed the questions for immigration, Isabel would squint and smile. "Quiero ver las fotos," she would say. The interview was canceled, like a play on opening night shut down when the actors are too drunk to take the stage. After she left, I found her crayon drawing of a bluebird tacked to the bedroom wall. I left too, and did not think of Isabel again until the night Francisca called to say, "Your wife is dead." Something was growing in her brain. I imagined my wife, who was not my wife, who never slept beside me, sleeping in the ground, wondered if my name was carved into the cross above her head. No epitaph and no corrido, another ghost in a riot of ghosts evaporating from the skin of dead Mexicans who staggered for days without water through the desert. 30 years ago, a girl from the land of Zapata kissed me once on the lips and died with my name nailed to hers like a broken door. I kept a snapshot of the wedding. Yesterday, it washed ashore on my desk. There was a conspiracy to commit a crime. This is my confession. I'd do it again. My cockroach lover. The summer I slept on JC's couch. There were roaches between the bristles of my toothbrush. Roaches pouring from the speakers of the stereo. A light flipped on in the kitchen at night revealed a Republican National Convention of roaches. An Indianapolis 500 of roaches. One night, I dreamed a giant roach leaned over me, brushing my face with kind antenna and whispering, "I love you." I awoke, slapping myself, and watched the darkness for hours because I realized this was a dream, and so that meant the cockroach did not really love me. That's it. Yeah. And speaking of cockroaches, Donald Trump. No, that's it. The Spanish means I died, I lived. In Puerto Rico, the leaves of El Moriviví close in the dark and open at first light. The fronds curl at a finger's touch and then unfurl again. My father, a mountain born of mountains, the tallest Puerto Rican in New York, who scraped doorways, who could crack the walls with the rumble of his voice, kept a Moriviví growing in his ribs. He would die, then live. My father spoke in the tongue of El Moriviví, teaching me the parable of Joe Fleming, who screwed his lit cigarette into the arms of the spicks he caught flapping like fish. My father was a bony boy, the nerves in his back crushed by the ILO Coal and Ice Company, the load he lifted up too many flights of stairs. 3 times they would meet to brawl for a crowd after school. The first time my father opened his eyes to gravel and the shoes of his enemy. The second time he rose and dug his arm up to the elbow in the monster's belly, so badly did he want to tear out the heart and eat it. The third time Fleming did not show up, and the boys with cigarette burns clapped their spindly champion on the back all the way down the street. Fleming would become a cop, fired for breaking bones in too many faces. He died smoking in bed, a sheet of flame up to his chin. There was a Moriviví sprouting in my father's chest. He would die, then live. He spat obscenities like sunflower seeds at the driver who told him to sit at the back of the bus in Mississippi, then slipped his cap over his eyes and fell asleep. He spent a week in jail, called it the best week of his life, strode through the jailhouse door, and sat behind the driver of the bus on the way out of town, his Air Force uniform all that kept the noose from his neck. He would come to know the jailhouse again among hundreds of demonstrators ferried by police to Hart Island on the East River, where the city of New York stacks the coffins of anonymous and stillborn bodies. Here, Confederate prisoners once wept for the stars and bars. Now the prisoners sang freedom songs. The jailers outlawed phone calls, so we were sure my father must be a body like the bodies rolling waterlogged in the East River till he came back from the island of the dead, black hair combed meticulously. When the riots burned in Brooklyn night after night, my father was a peacemaker on the corner with a megaphone. A fiery chunk of concrete fell from the sky and missed his head by inches. My mother would tell me, "Your father is out dodging bullets." He spoke at a rally with Malcolm X, incantatory words billowing through the bundled crowd, lifting hands and faces. "Teach!" they cried. My father clicked a photograph of Malcolm as he bent to hear a question, finger pressed against the chin. 2 months later, the assassins stampeded the crowd to shoot Malcolm, blood leaping from his chest as he fell. My father would die too, but then he would live again after every riot, every rally, every arrest, every night in jail, the change from his pockets landing hard on the dresser at 4 a.m. every time I swore he was gone for good. My father knew the secrets of El Moriviví, that he would die, then live. He drifted off at the wheel, drove into a guardrail, shook his head, and walked away without a web of scars or fractures. He passed out from the heat in the subway, toppled onto the tracks, and somehow missed the 3rd rail. He tied a white apron across his waist to open a grocery store, pulled a revolver from the counter to startle the gangsters demanding protection, then put up signs for a clearance sale as soon as they backed out the door with their hands in the air. When the family finally took a vacation in the mountains of the Hudson Valley, a hotel with waiters in white jackets and white paint peeling in the room, the roof exploded in flame as if the ghost of Joe Fleming and his cigarette trailed us everywhere. And it was then that my father appeared in the smoke like a general leading the charge in battle, shouting commands at the volunteer fire company, steering the water from the hoses since he was immune to death by fire or water, as if he wore the crumbled leaves of El Moriviví in an amulet slung around his neck. My brother called to say El Moriviví was gone. My father tore at the wires, the electrodes, the IV, saying that he wanted to go home. The hospital was a jailhouse in Mississippi. The furious pulse that fired his heart in every fight flooded the chambers of his heart. The doctors scrutinized the film, the grainy shadows and the light, but could never see. My father was a Moriviví. I died. I lived. He died. He lived. He dies. He lives. I see the dark-skinned bodies falling in the street as their ancestors fell before the whip and steel, the last blood pooling, the last breath spitting. I see the immigrant street vendor flashing his wallet to the cops, shot so many times there are bullet holes in the soles of his feet. I see the deaf wood carver and his pocket knife crossing the street in front of a cop who yells, then fires. I see the drug raid, the wrong door kicked in, the minister's heart seizing up. I see the man hawking a fistful of cigarettes, the cop's choke hold that makes his wheezing lungs stop wheezing forever. I am in the crowd, at the window, kneeling beside the body left on the asphalt for hours covered in a sheet. I see the suicides. The conga player, handcuffed for drumming on the subway, hanged in the jail cell with his hands cuffed behind him. The suspect leaking blood from his chest in the back seat of the squad car. The 300-pound boy said to stampede, bare-handed into the bullets drilling his forehead. I see the coroner nodding, the words he types in his report burrowing into the skin like more bullets. I see the government investigations stacking, words buzzing on the page, then suffocated as bees suffocate in a jar. I see the next black man fleeing as the fugitive slave once fled, the slave catcher shot in the back for a broken tail light. I see the cop handcuff the corpse. I see the rebels marching, hands upraised before the riot squads, faces in bandanas against the tear gas, and I walk beside them unseen. I see the poets who will write the songs of insurrection generations unborn will read or hear a century from now. Words that make them wonder how we could have lived or died this way, how the descendants of slaves still fled and the descendants of slave catchers still shot them, how we awoke every morning without the blood of the dead sweating from every pore. Alabanza. Praise the cook with a shaven head and a tattoo on his shoulder that said, Oye, a blue-eyed Puerto Rican with people from Fajardo, the harbor of pirates centuries ago. Praise the lighthouse in Fajardo, candle glimmering white to worship the dark saint of the sea. Alabanza. Praise the cook's yellow pirate's cap, worn in the name of Roberto Clemente, his plane that flamed into the ocean loaded with cans for Nicaragua, for all the mouths chewing the ash of earthquakes. Alabanza. Praise the kitchen radio, dial click even before the dial on the oven, so that music and Spanish rose before bread. Praise the bread. Alabanza. Praise Manhattan from 107 flights up, like Atlantis glimpsed through the windows of an ancient aquarium. Praise the great windows where immigrants from the kitchen could squint and almost see their world, hear the chant of nations. Ecuador, Mexico, República Dominicana, Haiti, Yemen, Ghana, Bangladesh, Alabanza. Praise the kitchen in the morning where the gas burned blue on every stove and exhaust fans fired their diminutive propellers, hands cracked eggs with quick thumbs or sliced open cartons to build an altar of cans. Alabanza. Praise the busboy's music, the chime of his dishes and silverware in the tub. Alabanza. Praise the dish dog, the dishwasher who worked that morning because another dishwasher could not stop coughing or because he needed overtime to pile the sacks of rice and beans for a family floating away on some Caribbean island plagued by frogs. Alabanza. Praise the waitress who heard the radio in the kitchen and sang to herself about a man gone. Alabanza. After the thunder, wilder than thunder, after the shudder deep in the glass of the great windows, after the radio stopped singing like a tree full of terrified frogs, after night burst the dam of day and flooded the kitchen. For a time the stoves glowed in darkness like the lighthouse in Fajardo, like a cook's soul. Soul, I say, even if the dead cannot tell us about the bristles of God's beard, because God has no face. Soul, I say, to name the smoke beings flung in constellations across the night sky of this city and cities to come. Alabanza, I say, even if God has no face. Alabanza. When the war began, from Manhattan and Kabul, two constellations of smoke rose and drifted to each other, mingling in icy air, and one said with an Afghan tongue, "Teach me to dance, we have no music here." And the other said with a Spanish tongue, "I will teach you, music is all we have." Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.